Making the kind of music that I've always been interested in always relied heavily on creating a picture for the listener, as some sort of space. Part of that, as far as my role for creating it, is to work heavily on the sounds themselves. And oftentimes, I think I focus more on the sounds themselves than the actual written elements. Very well crafted sounds are far more interesting to me than a multitude of melody. It's the key, running everything into everything else to create new universes. That's a Hadron-colliding form of music making, smashing everything into each other. My name is Konrad Black. I am a music producer, a sound designer, and a composer. My background in production and in music dates back to, I started DJing in 1995. I started producing basically almost from day one. To me, that's still that sort of mid-90s era of drum and bass is still my favorite kind of era for sound design and making these sort of filmic soundscapes. Making the kind of music that I've always been interested in has always relied heavily on creating a picture for the listener. Writing in the format or medium of electronic music, whether it be drum and bass or techno or hip hop, I was always focused on the sounds, and therefore very well crafted sounds are far more interesting to me than a multitude of melody, let's say. This kind of led me easily into sound design. Then over the years, I started getting more into doing more sound design and composition for an artist friend of mine, Jeremy Shaw. Jeremy Shaw is a visual artist that lives here in Berlin as well, that is also from Canada. And I've done the music and sound design for all of his installations, which is now 4. He's very gifted with melody, which is great because I like making the sounds and focusing on that. Phase Shifting Index is a 7-channel video installation. Each video details the belief systems of one of 7 fictional subculture groups spread across time, different time frames. And each of these aspire to induce a parallel reality that could redirect the evolution of the human species. And they do this through embodied forms of ritual, ideology, and movement. The different groups are sort of cultural movements through time. For example, the first one is the cyclical culture. It's based on 70s body-mind centering. And for that, I wrote a tribal techno piece. The second one is the Violet Lux. They're like an 80s new romantic with bits of qigong in there. And I wrote a sort of dark wave, new beat style 80s club track. The third one is the 01s. They're like another 80s, but more late 80s, early 90s sort of breakdance crew. And I wrote a sort of ethereal ambient piece for one section and then a breakdance track basically for their ecstatic moment. The other one is the Alignment Movement. They're like a late 50s, early 60s calisthenics meets Berghain techno stomp with some jump step thrown in there. They are just doing a sort of choreographed step routine. The Reclaimers are more of a sort of an addiction recovery center group that are suffering from unit addiction. Another group would be the Countdown, which is based on this sort of 90s video aesthetic. This group of girlcore, this group of girls tossing the camera around. And the last one is the Quantum Moderns, and they are a 60s modern dance meets Quantum Woo, and for them I wrote a Steve Reich kind of inspired, Philip Glass inspired minimalist piece for piano and voice. They start to interact with one another, and then they arrive at this sort of crescendo. The sound for all 7 films is all playing. There's spot speakers right in front. There's a bench in front of each video. So there was a lot of planning, a lot of mapping, a lot of finishing individual films, basically, and then figuring out how we're all going to work on them all as a whole. Orchestral tools are a go-to of mine. Working on a project like this, the deadlines are coming fast and furious, and I mean, here I am working on something from the 70s that's meant to be in that time and place, in that space, and also then I'm going straight into the next day into early 80s, and then I'm going into mid 90s. So it's really helpful for me to have all of those kind of tools available. It makes my job a lot easier to have access to such great libraries. When I'm using orchestral tools in sound design, I like using the spot mics, dry, because I like to have control over all of the parameters. And I like to, as I mentioned, I like to combine them with other sounds to create new sounds. I am always overdriving or processing them in some way or another, because sometimes they're so realistic that it imparts a feeling of being in a symphony that I don't want. I want more of the texture, and I want the physicality of the bowing of the instruments, or to hear the person blowing the instrument directly is far more interesting than placing them into the room. The collections that I really love the most, for me, is definitely all of the low-end register stuff. The contrabasso, the cellos, the organs, those, and also the choir stuff I really love. I'm working on a project with a harpsichord, so this is a fantastic version of a harpsichord. I have several recordings of different harpsichords that I'm working with right now. All the lowest register, I mean, obviously this is coming from my days of being into the drum and bass and this sort of growling, low register sounds. Anything bass heavy, anything droning, those are all the ones that I really love. Dirty or analog synth sounds are really amazing when paired with very clean, very well recorded string, you know, and then I love to run them through my signal chains. Let's say I've loaded up Orchestral Tools Metropolis Arc 2, and I have those low bass choir guys singing, and also these low cellos, and then I would like to run them through. I have a Sherman filter bank over here, which is an analog filter, and just give them a little bit of a touch of this sort of dust on the top, and then that has modulation to filter sweep a little bit, that they start to undulate and they start to move, and you get these harmonic distortion, which I absolutely love. And then I run that into the EMU, and then I can either sample that and then run that through the whole modulation inside that, and that has a really amazing output. Like the signal coming out of that is very strong. So again, it's just adding more harmonics on top. And then I will patch it through my board over here and then into my space echoes for a little bit more saturation. And then I also have them all running through my distortion pedals here. I like to crank it, overdrive it so that it sounds like it's trying to break through, and it sounds like you're ripping the fabric of space-time, basically. I didn't elect to change my path into being a sound designer, let's say. It was more working with an artist and other artists as well who wanted the production sound on their works, basically. So I was kind of doing what I was always doing already, but in the context of visual artists' installation. So for me, this was amazing because it's like scoring, not in the traditional sense maybe, but scoring the movements of this much more abstract work. And that way I can kind of tell the story with my sounds that I'm getting from the artist's work. So it is a symbiotic relationship that is very rewarding to me as a producer or sound designer or composer, however you want to term it.